Picture this. You're 65 years old. You've just walked out of your workplace for the very last time. The handshakes are done. Someone bought a cake. And now you're driving home wondering what tomorrow actually looks like. For some Australians, tomorrow looks like coffee on the deck outside a fully paid-off home with nothing but time ahead of them. For others, tomorrow looks like a mortgage statement landing in the letterbox and a quiet panic about how the next 25 years are going to work financially. Here's the question nobody seems to ask out loud. Which group is bigger? And more importantly, which group are you in? Because the numbers on this are genuinely surprising. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand and what you can still do about it, regardless of where you're at right now. My name is Daniel Brooks. Welcome back to Centrelink Info Aus. Today we're getting into one of the most important and most avoided conversations in Australian retirement planning: debt. Specifically, how much of it is following people into retirement, why that number is getting worse every year, what it actually does to your super and your lifestyle when it arrives with you, and the practical steps that genuinely move the needle if you're still working and still have time to act. Let's get into it. The headline figure sounds reassuring at first. According to the latest available data, around 66% of recent Australian retirees own their home outright with no mortgage. 2/3 of retirees reaching that finish line with the house paid off. But here's the catch that the headline doesn't tell you. That number is shrinking fast, and the generation right behind the current retiree cohort is in a significantly more difficult position than the one before it. Research from the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute shows that 28% of Australians aged 50 to 64 are now carrying mortgage debt heading toward retirement. Back in 1990, only 7% of households aged 65 and over still had housing debt. Today, that figure has more than doubled to 15%, and it's still climbing. Some economists are projecting that by 2040, fewer than half of Australian retirees will own their home outright. If that projection is right, it would be the biggest structural shift in retirement since compulsory superannuation was introduced in 1992. So the honest answer to how many Australians retire debt-free is this: the majority still do, but the majority is getting smaller every year. And the type of debt people are carrying into retirement isn't a few $1,000s on a credit card anymore. It's mortgages of $200,000, $300,000, sometimes more. And here's why that matters so much beyond the obvious stress of it. Once you stop earning a regular wage, debt doesn't just sit there. It actively eats your super. Australians who retired while still renting or still paying off a mortgage had on average just over half the superannuation balance of outright homeowners. Let that sit for a moment. Half. And 59% of retirees who didn't own their home outright finished work with less than $100,000 in super. Compare that to homeowners where the same figure was 26%. Debt at retirement isn't just a debt problem. It becomes a wealth problem, a confidence problem, and a lifestyle problem all at once. Research from Vanguard's How Australia Retires report found that nearly half of Australians who retired with a mortgage said they felt slightly confident or not at all confident about their financial future. And confidence matters far more than people realize in retirement. Retirees who feel genuinely secure about their finances are statistically more likely to spend, travel, and actually live the lifestyle they spent decades working toward. People carrying debt into retirement tend to do the complete opposite. They hoard their super out of fear, live smaller than they actually need to, and turn what should be the best years of their life into one long cost-cutting exercise. So why is this happening? Because it would be easy to say Australians are just spending too much or not saving hard enough. But that framing completely misses the actual picture. The Sydney median house price now sits close to $1.8 million. Even regional markets have doubled in the last decade. First home buyers aged over 45 now make up 10% of the market, up from just 2% back in 2005. If you buy your first home at 45 on a 30-year loan, you're 75 before that mortgage disappears. Higher interest rates have pushed repayments up significantly compared to a decade ago. And more Australians in their 50s are pulling equity out of their existing homes to help adult children get into the property market, to renovate, or simply to cover the rising cost of daily life. Every redraw resets the clock on when that mortgage ends. Then there's the silent trap that doesn't get talked about enough: credit cards and buy now, pay later. Australians are currently carrying close to $20 billion in credit card debt that is actively attracting interest. That is the highest level in over 4 years. For anyone in the decade before retirement who is juggling a mortgage, a car loan, and a couple of credit card balances, the interest alone can wipe out years' worth of super contributions. Think about it this way. If you've got $15,000 sitting on a credit card at 21% interest, you're handing the bank more than $3,000 a year just to stand still. You're not falling behind because you're spending wildly. You're falling behind because the system is charging you interest while inflation erodes your savings at the same time. That's a structural problem, not a personal failure. There's also a generational shift in the mortgage burden itself that nobody warned the current generation about. Our parents and grandparents bought homes for 2 or 3 times their annual income. Today, the average Australian is buying at 8 to 10 times their household income. That changes everything about how long the debt lasts, how much interest is paid across a working lifetime, and how much is actually left over for superannuation contributions and meaningful savings. A typical Australian today will pay more in mortgage interest across their working life than their parents paid for their entire home. That's the environment people are trying to retire from. So what do you actually do if you're 40, 50, or 55 right now and you're looking at debt that feels like it's not moving fast enough? There's a clear framework that works, and it doesn't require anything complicated. The first step is knowing your actual number. Sit down and write out every single debt you carry, the balance, the interest rate, and the minimum monthly payment. A lot of people carry these numbers in their head without ever writing them in one place and seeing the total. Seeing the total changes how you engage with it. The second step is attacking the highest interest debt first. Credit cards and personal loans before the mortgage. The maths is unambiguous. A credit card at 21% is destroying your wealth faster than a home loan at 6% ever will. Clear the expensive debt first, and the psychological momentum that follows tends to carry people further than they expected. The third step is making your super work harder through salary sacrifice. The average Australian retires with around $200,000 in super. The ASFA Comfortable Retirement Standard now says a single person needs roughly $630,000 to retire comfortably, and a couple needs around $730,000. Salary sacrificing even an extra $100 a week into super in your 40s can add tens of thousands of dollars to your final balance through compound growth. And every dollar you salary sacrifice is taxed at just 15% inside super instead of your marginal rate, which could be 32%, 37%, or higher. That gap is real money. The fourth step is to avoid refinancing into a longer loan just to lower your monthly repayments. That's how a 25-year mortgage quietly becomes a 35-year mortgage, and suddenly you're still paying the bank at 70. Instead, look at switching to fortnightly repayments rather than monthly. That one change alone, making 26 half payments a year instead of 12 full ones, can knock years off your mortgage and save tens of thousands in interest without you noticing any difference in your weekly budget. The fifth step is the mindset shift that underpins everything else. The Australians who retire debt-free almost always share one way of thinking about money. They treat every dollar of debt as a dollar stolen from their future self. When you see your mortgage that way, you start paying it down with a completely different energy. Pay rises don't become upgraded cars or bigger renovations. They become extra mortgage repayments and bigger super contributions. And that discipline, applied consistently over a decade, is what separates the two groups. One more thing worth saying directly. If you're in a relationship, have this conversation with your partner. Money problems are the #1 source of conflict in Australian households. Couples who don't talk openly about debt almost always end up paying for that silence in ways that go well beyond dollars. Sitting down together once a month, looking at the numbers as a team, and setting one shared goal does more than most financial strategies ever could. Two people pulling in the same direction will always outperform one person trying to fix it alone. The number of Australians retiring debt-free is going to keep falling unless something changes at the household level. The government isn't arriving with a solution. The employer super contribution won't close the gap on its own. The only person who can change your number is you, and the best time to start is before the window closes. If this video gave you something useful today, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me where you're at. Still paying down a mortgage? Already debt-free? Somewhere in between? I read every comment. Subscribe to Centrelink Info Aus if you haven't already. Daniel Brooks here. I'll see you in the next one.